Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mavens of Data. Today, we are going to be talking about how you can create a resume that will get you that job interview. We've got a fantastic guest here in Albert Bellamy. Albert's an amazing guy here. He had a long career in leadership in the military. He recently, past few years, transitioned out of the military into a full-time data career. Right now, he's at Alteryx, where he is teaching people full-time within the Alteryx organization. And he also spends a lot of time and energy helping data professionals with resumes to help them get jobs. So if you're looking for the ability to improve your resume fast, this is the guy to talk to. He's fantastic. Albert, if we could start off with in 2024, how important do you think a resume is? Is it less important today in the digital age, or does it still really matter?
It still really matters. And you have to look at, there's far too many people out there kind of griping about what's wrong with resumes or what's wrong with using a resume to evaluate. And we can definitely get into that. I've got kind of ready-made backhands for all of the customary arguments, but it's becoming a more remote world. There's no question about that. And you're no longer constrained by the tyranny of geography. You can compete for jobs across state lines, sometimes across international lines. The talent pool available to a company is at least national, if not global at this point. I can command a six-figure salary with tech companies from Cedar Point, North Carolina. I'm 3 hours from anything that could even resemble a tech hub. And so when you consider that one or two pages that you get, that is the great equalizer. If princes and paupers all get the same amount of space, the same constraints to make their case for that job. Now, the greater equalizer, of course, is networking, topic for a different time. But assuming that you're competing with people that are submitting a parchment for a job, I get a page, you get a page, everybody gets a page. What you do with that page is on you, and you can't, no amount of money or prestige or whatever can buy you any more space. What you do with that space tells a lot.
Yeah.
And the thing that I love about it is you can tell a lot about a person by their resume. And a lot of people are out there saying, I got in an argument with a guy the other day saying like, oh, these AI resumes are so perfect that you can't tell anybody apart. Well, sure you can. I mean, you can look at a resume and see that a person, especially in tech, do you value hard skills or soft skills? You know, everybody's got one that they like a little better than the other. It's like the Beatles and Elvis. You can't like them both equally. Can you communicate effectively within some sort of constraints and potentially to a non-technical audience? So you look at resumes that are just wall-to-wall buzzwords, code libraries, abbreviations, and you sit there and think, man, if you weren't a data professional, you wouldn't know any of this. If this gets in front of a non-technical hiring manager, you are toast. So can you communicate effectively? Can you communicate effectively within constraints? That translates directly to your ability to do the job. How often in tech are you told, hey, you've got 1 minute to brief the C-suite, or 3 minutes, or 5? You've got one slide in this 50-slide presentation to make your case for your project getting adopted. That's a thing that happens. That is a challenge that we all face. You don't get an hour to make your case. You get a constrained amount of time and a constrained amount of space. You can tell if someone values presentation. Can they sell themselves effectively? Can they sell their initiatives effectively? Again,
Yep.
you may be the pitch person for a team trying to get a project sold. Can you do that in a short amount of time, short amount of space? Are you taking shortcuts with AI? That could be I suppose that could be a selling point or a detriment depending on the situation.
Yeah, it depends on the quality. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And generally you can spot an AI generated resume a mile away, but you know, if a job's in demand, it can get thousands of applications. I looked into one recently that got 1,800, I think, and that was in like a week, 1,800 applications. No hiring authority has the time to interview all of them. So there's got to be some kind of barrier to entry. That first barrier is the resume. So, you know, people like to sort of wish themselves into the land of aught. There's like some sort of multiverse where there's an objective measure of value or quality for analysts. I see various theories about, oh, if we could have a test, or if we could have a kind of an industry standard certification or a certain degree. Not only does that not exist in our industry, but all of the potential solutions are at least as problematic as a resume, if not
Mm.
more, just for potentially different reasons. I mean, there's ways to game all of them just as badly as you can a resume.
Yep. Yeah, it's such good. It's such a good take there, I think, and a huge piece of that being the resume is kind of like the first window into how you show the other side that you can communicate well. You know, succinctly, you can make that pitch for your project. I love that as advice. And Albert, I went through an exercise a while back. I actually looked at some resumes that I had sent out like really early in my career, and they were
That's a
pretty bad.
humbling exercise.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was humbling. It was bad. And when I looked at it, a lot of them, like, I had emailed them and I just didn't get a response, you know, like, and when I
yeah,
look back at it, I could see why. And I think for me, one of the biggest things that when I was like kind of reflecting on that is at that point in my career, I had never hired anybody myself. So I had never been
yep.
on the other side. And so I just like had no clue how to talk about the things that I could do and what they were looking for. Could you talk like a little bit about what happens on the other side? Somebody sends in a resume, and then like what typically happens to that resume, and what are people looking for on the hiring manager side?
Yeah. I'll offer my perspective with a grain of salt, just because I've never been in a position to hire. I've been part of the hiring process and reviewed resumes, mostly for veterans. So I know how bad our resumes generally are. But I definitely talk to a lot of hiring managers, count some of them as friends, recruiters as well. And I think the biggest myth that's out there is that a company is looking for the unicorn. They're looking for the best of the best, or they have some vested interest in going through these massive thousands of resumes and finding the absolute pinnacle of those people that have applied. Nothing could be further from the truth. And when you think about it, everybody's got a job to do. Hiring manager is a job. Now, it may be a professional job or it may be an amateur job. So you got a big organization, you've got a big HR department. They are professional hirers, if that's even a word. And so, like, that's all they do all day: read resumes, make screening calls, task recruiters, interview people. It's what they do. Anything that you do every day, you're going to become very quick and efficient at that. And so a hiring authority, their objective, like their unicorn, honestly, is somebody they can hire that's going to stick in that job for forever, potentially. They want to hire somebody that's going to do that same job for 5 years. If they're an amateur hiring authority, like they've got some other job to do, generally those people hate and fear the hiring process. I mean, there's so many mines that they can come across. They can open themselves up to litigation. It's awful. Most of them hate it. So they're looking to get it over with as quickly as possible. And their objective is not to find the absolute best of the best of those, 1,000 people that apply. Their objective is to find someone that can do the job and is a fit. So if
Mm.
you get 1,000 applications for a job, probably 300 of them are woefully unqualified. They're the kind of spray and pray. They're sitting there clicking easy apply and hoping to get lucky.
Yep.
And every once in a while they get a nibble maybe, but it's a volume game for them. They're not interested in building skills or being qualified. It's just like, hey, let me get in a door somewhere. So those get screened out pretty quickly. But then there may be 100 of them that are wildly overqualified. Well, that's also a bad hire. Why? Because they're either like they've got a job hiatus or something, or they're a little discouraged by a long job search process, and maybe they're just hitting below their weight a little bit, trying to get what they can. They're trying to get in with a target company and work their way up. But from a hiring manager's perspective, that may be not the greatest hire anyway, because if you hire that unicorn, that wildly overqualified person, they're going to get in that job. They're going to
They
get
might
bored.
be out. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're either going to get promoted real quick, or they're going to be looking for a better job the minute they get in the door. In 6 months, you're going to have to hire for that job again. You might as well have hired someone that got fired. So what they're looking for is someone kind of in that middle zone, the sweet spot, where it's like maybe they have all the technical qualifications, but only those, or maybe just a little bit below, But the most important thing is that they're a fit. Because once you get someone in there that's a fit, that's a hard worker, and they have the work ethic that you want and they get along with the team, you can upskill, 10, 20% of the technical requirements once they get in the door, because they're going to be happy and fit in working there. The worst thing you can do is hire a technically qualified person that isn't a fit or is like a toxic personality.
Yeah.
Because then you can never get rid of them unless they leave voluntarily. And so really the hiring process is mostly like, yeah, obstacle one, are they qualified or pretty darn close? Obstacle two, do I like talking to this person? Do they feel like they fit our
Yeah.
corporate climate? Are they going to be, a team player, or are they going to come in and be, an eyesore or someone that can't communicate, can't work well with others? So that's one of the things that people say, oh, this, they hate on the hiring process because they're like, oh, people just they want to hire someone they want to have a beer with. It's not necessarily that they want to like bro down with somebody. It's just that if I hire someone that's toxic that I can't get along with, that's a
Yeah.
cancer to the organization. Um, so yeah, it's a kind of an aim for the middle rather than, super duper high ceiling. They want someone with a high floor, like unlikely to fail, likely to be content in this job for a while and be a good fit with the organization.
Yep. Yeah. It's such a good distinction because I think people see the job description, and if you read the job description, that's not like if you just took it at face value, you wouldn't see anything about how important cultural fit and getting along with
Yeah.
people is, and you'd see like a list of 20 technical skills that you probably only need two or three of them realistically, and
Yeah, on
so
a
it's
daily basis.
yeah. So
Yep.
it's a really good. I think that's a really good experienced perspective that I'm sure that's really helpful for folks to hear. So if somebody's trying to make their resume stand out for say it's a data analyst role, so they're trying to get themselves in the door for that interview so they can sell themselves as the good team player cultural fit. What are some of the things that you would recommend on the resume itself to make them look really, really strong? Any tips there?
I think you've got to lead with impact. You lose people kind of moan about the stats about how long it takes a hiring authority to read a resume, and that's also funny to me. But you want to hit with the best value right off the top. People,
Yeah.
we read top to bottom, left to right. So as you read down the page, your attention wanes. Something the team's notification dings, something shiny flies past your face. We get naturally distracted by this world we live in. And just reading through, if it doesn't grab you from the start, it becomes kind of a chore to get through it.
Yeah.
The stat about whatever, depending on where you hear it, the hiring manager only takes 7 seconds to read a resume. Once you've read 1,000 resumes, it doesn't even take 7 seconds to figure out if the
Yeah.
resume is garbage.
Yep.
So 7 seconds is the average. If it's a good resume, they probably read it for 30 seconds. And then they
Yep.
know this is a person I want to call screen or interview or move forward with. If it's a trash resume, it might take you 3 to 5 seconds, and then that thing's in the round file. So whatever your heavy hitter thing is, whatever your selling point is, that should be at the top of the resume. And grab them with it right off the bat. I recommend a summary section. I see a ton of people going without that in an effort to, whatever, search engine optimize or cram as many keywords in as possible. To me, that's terrible. I would always start with the narrative. Start telling your story and grab the reader's attention with something that's unique and powerful about you. And then from there, whatever your selling point is, which is generally your experience, because that's that's the best selling point of all, is I've done this job successfully or something very like
Yeah.
it. Within the experience, it's all about talk about your accomplishments, not your activities. Don't describe your job. Um, Projects are great, especially if you don't have a ton of experience. Projects are great too. There's a lot with projects. It's just, you want to do relevant work. I have this thing called fun with numbers, and I know that Maven's great with the competitions, and I know that Tableau does Viz of the Day and all those things. I'm not into crapping on whatever gets you up in the morning and gets you into data. If you love refining the Titanic data set, I've recently tried myself. If you love making the world's prettiest dashboard, do that. Awesome. Just know that that's not going to be as convincing to a hiring authority as if you're actually doing things that are relevant to their domain. So if you're, all fired up to get into healthcare analytics, your project should be about healthcare,
Yeah.
healthcare informatics. If you want to get into manufacturing, you want to work for a car manufacturer, you should be doing projects on like mean time to failure and and equipment maintenance and things like that. If you're already interested in that thing, once again, that sells you as a candidate. It says, hey, this is a person that gets up thinking about cars. If I'm
Yep.
Ford Motor Company, this is a person I want to hire. Why? Because they're going to come to work every day with a song in their heart and really want to make a difference and want to do that work. It's not going to be a drudgery for them. So that goes a long way. I say the other thing is on everybody's got the same internships. They got the same kind of entry level jobs. If you have those, but whatever you're listing for experience, there's a lot of commonality there. The people that set themselves apart are the ones that show that they understand the business problem.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare to see an intern walk into their job and say, one of my goals is I want to understand my impact on the business. Somebody walks in and says that as a manager or as a somebody who's in charge of the interns, you immediately be like, all right, this a
Sounds
different
good.
cat right here.
Yeah.
Yep. But so many people they get done with their internships or they get done with a 6 month or a 1 month entry level or 1 month, 1 year entry level job. And afterwards they're putting it on their resume and they're like, oh, we didn't measure anything. Well, yeah, I mean, the company measured stuff. You just weren't privy to it because you didn't think to ask at the time. So a lot of that is just people act like that's in some steel vault somewhere and they weren't, they're people at their level aren't allowed to know. Now you're allowed to know most places. You just got to ask the question. But after you're gone from you can't call up your old supervisor a year later and be like, hey, can you give me some stats on my impact on that job I did? Like, hey, you're the farthest thing from my mind. Love you, but no, can't. I don't have
Yep.
time for that.
Yeah, such good advice in there. The I'll definitely echo your point about the just a few seconds is all it takes basically for the person reading that resume really to decide, is it getting tossed or am I going to read more?
Yeah.
It really is like 3 to 5 seconds in my experience, which is crazy to think about. But you could complain about it, or you could accept it as the reality and then make sure that very top of your resume catches their attention within that 3 seconds, and I
Yep.
think that's the advice that you give, which is that's the real advice that folks should be operating in. And I also love the point about going towards projects that are relative to the specific domain you want to get into in the job, because a hiring manager, they're not really looking for just a data analyst. They might be looking for like a marketing analyst or a supply chain
Yeah.
analyst. Like they're looking for you to do a specific thing with data. And yes, some of the skills are transferable, but if you can show that you have the domain knowledge, it's such a leg up over the next person who doesn't. So that's, I think, really, really good advice. You want to sell
Healthcare
them that you can do
especially
the
is
job.
huge for that because coming out before I got into marketing, I had a couple nibbles at healthcare analytics jobs. And I remember specifically they didn't move forward with me because they said, we really need someone that understands the language and has been in healthcare
Yeah.
informatics for a bit. And that struck me. Not that I was, the world's greatest candidate at the time, but just the fact that they specifically gave that feedback to my recruiter that we really need people that have been in the domain, that swim in these waters and know the language. And that's huge. It took me, I would say after a year in marketing analytics was when I really started to understand the language of marketing data.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that my company wanted to develop a veteran talent pipeline. And so I was attractive to them for other reasons. And they were into hiring people that had no experience. So usually that worked out, sometimes not. But those are few and far between. So if you go
Yeah.
in for a marketing analytics job, they generally want you to know what you're talking about. But actually, the Google Marketing Analytics course, which I never finished, but that was great too because I started doing that after being in marketing for a while. I was like, I really kind of wish I had done this from the get-go, because this really teaches you a ton. But there's a lot of good
Yeah, you get
courses out there
like the
that'll,
terminology and stuff at
yeah.
least. Yeah. Yep.
But yeah,
Yeah.
figuring
So
out what domain you want to be in is massive, and not enough people take the time to do that.
yeah, it's an extra step, right? It's a little bit of an
Yep.
extra effort, but I don't know. I
And it
think
feels
that
constrictive. Like
yeah,
people don't want to narrow themselves. They want to be like, I can do everything. I'm nah. It's not a selling point. Jack of all trades is not a. It's not a qualification.
right. Yeah, yeah. Saying like, "Hey, I'm mediocre at 20 things."
Yeah.
Right?
Oh
They
yeah.
want you to be good at one or two things, you
Yep.
know. So yeah, I think you're totally right on. How about so we talked about some of the tips like for a good resume. What about some things to avoid? Like, what are some of the things that if you looked at a resume and you're a hiring manager, you think you'd toss it out right away? Like, what are some of those red flags to be careful of?
It's funny, actually, what we were just talking about. So the kind of the jack of all trades thing,
Yeah,
and the stacking. I call it the skill stacking arms race. It's people try and load up that skills section, or they put it at the top of their resume, which I never recommend. But skill section at the top of the resume, and it's got 8 coding languages and 20 different
yeah,
libraries, and I do. I've done. They list Jira. They list every Microsoft 365 platform. It's just it's an effort to tickle the algorithm, or kind of trigger your resume being included in 10,000 different recruiter searches. It's just it's a fool's errand. I love the Bruce Lee quote where he says, "I don't fear the man that's practiced 10,000 kicks. I fear the man that's practiced one kick 10,000 times." You want to put the stuff on there that you're good at. And
yep,
there's nobody out there that's good at 10 coding languages. Andrew Ng, is not good at 10 coding languages, and he'd probably be the first one to admit that. So you, entry level analyst, aspiring data scientist, you ain't good at 10 coding languages. Trust me on this. And if you say you are, then that right off the bat, that's a red flag, because it's like this person either doesn't know how to prioritize their own training, they don't know how to quantify their own skills. So yeah, you need to focus up. Again, feels constrictive. It feels like you're, like before the fact, you're kind of you're discounting yourself, or you're counting yourself out from certain jobs, but it's fine. Like, just be good at the things you're good at. If you're the world's greatest Tableau dashboard maker, be that. List a couple other things. You should probably have something where you can do a BI platform, and you can, you're working on this is your best coding language, maybe two. um, but yeah, just it's addition by subtraction on the skills.
yep,
Talked about, I think my favorite phrase with resumes is, let's list accomplishments, not activities. You don't want to talk about your daily grind. You don't want to describe your job. Most jobs have pretty clear titles. If you're a project manager, if you're an elementary school teacher, if you're a data analyst or a business intelligence analyst, people know what those are. You don't need to sit there and talk about your day-to-day tasks. Um, don't create metrics. If you do a thing and that thing is not impressive, it doesn't become impressive if you do it 1,000 times without screwing it up. So don't list, I walked in, turned on the lights, and made the coffee 1,000 days in a row without burning it. It's just it's like that. And then most
yep.
people are kind of, in an effort to put a pretty number on their resume, they're making up stuff. Don't do that. If you haven't measured anything, do the best you can. But what else? Don't go to Chat GPT and cut and paste your LinkedIn profile in and say, write me a good resume. Chat GPT is real good at fiction, folks. And when you've read 50 or 100 resumes, you can spot the AI generated ones a mile away. And that right there is immediate disqualifier for most hiring authorities. There's certain words and phrases, there's certain metrics that ChatGPT or any of the generative AI systems will make up. And anybody that's read 50 or 100 of them, you can spot them a mile away. So I mean, that's all I'll say about that. But you want to write your resume yourself, even if it's not the greatest. You can go to Chat GPT and have it help you. Hey, give me some more impactful verbs. Give me some more. Put this into Google XYZ format. Stuff like that. That's great. But you really need to be very critical of anything that you get assistance from AI with make sure it's something you can stand behind, because anything you put in that resume, you're going to get asked about in an interview. And if you kind of look at it and go, "Ooh, yeah, that metric there, that was generated by Grok," they're going to be like, "All right, thanks for your time. You know,
Yep.
don't call us,
Yeah.
we'll call you."
I think you're kind of touching on a piece of advice that I'd give, which is like, don't be, no BS really, because I think for me, if I'm trying to hire somebody, if I get a whiff that like they're lying on the resume or like telling me they have skills they don't, it's kind of frustrating in the interview process. But the biggest thing is, as soon as I hear that once, I immediately question everything else.
Yep.
And I'm also going to question like this person's integrity. And, if they're giving me an analysis when they're on the job, are they going to be the person that like
Yeah.
won't give me bad information? And they'll always try to paint a rosy picture where really I want like high integrity, trust, none of that nonsense. That's like probably my personal biggest red flag that I would toss somebody for. So I think
Yeah.
really good nuance there. That's awesome. Albert, how about applicant tracking software? People talk about the ATS. How important is it for people to know about this, and like what should they know about that type of software?
I hesitate to say it's important at all, because people go way too far into it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people out there that they're frustrated with the job search, and I get it, but they're looking for an excuse. And they get to the point where it's like, well, it can't be me. I've tried everything. It can't be my skill set. It can't be my approach. It's got to be something keeping me down. And it feels like we've got a world full of analysts that all read Weapons of Math Destruction and took all the wrong lessons from it. So that their conclusion is, well, let's all start pandering to these algorithms that are ruining our lives. So as you see one resume after another, that's just chock-a-block full of search engine optimized. And, oh, I got 100 score on JobScan and resume.io. And it's almost like another data project for them. It's like, oh, how can I hyperparameter tune this data science project to get the best score? How can I get the best score on the SEO? The ATS is a screening mechanism. And as far as I can tell, and as far as I can glean from the people in the know that are using it, it's to get rid of the woefully underqualified applicants, the people that are just spraying and praying, easy applying. They're applying for jobs for which they have maybe half the qualifications or less. They're just, they're not even in the ballpark. That's to make sure that the hiring manager doesn't have to waste time reading resumes of people that have zero chance of getting the job. If you're qualified and you don't have certain things on your resume that may tweak the ATS and get it to trash your resume, you're going to be fine. A human reader is going to see your resume. So these people that are just spazzing about the ATS, I'm going to skip the poll so I can see the chat there. These people that are like spazzing out about the ATS and designing their whole resume around it, I've seen resumes that are search engine optimized to the max, and they make your eyes bleed. So congratulations, if your goal was to get past the AI only to be immediately trashed by the first human that sets eyes on your resume,
Yeah.
mission accomplished, I guess. But you've got to be able to. The ATS is the little stumbling block before you get to the big test. You've got to have your resume to the point that that it's not going to get trashed by the ATS. But the much bigger stumbling block is appeal to a human reader, and so that's where your energy and attention needs to go. So yeah, I would say certain things don't have logos on there. Personally, I would never put a picture of myself on a resume for obvious reasons. I mean, it's not a selling point. But even if it was, if I look like Brad Pitt, why would you put your picture on a resume? Do you want to get an interview because you're hot? Like, is that a thing? I mean, and then are you going to impress people to get the job? I don't know. But to me, there's no upside putting a picture of yourself. It can trip an ATS. Logos can trip an ATS. Graphics. I would never get a template from Canva. Love Canva. Use Canva all the time. Would never use it for a resume template. The vast majority of them are just so stylized and so kind of artsy fartsy that it's gonna offend an ATS somewhere. So yeah, I would just say, make a clean resume template. There are plenty of places to get those. I use a site called Credle. They don't pay me anything. As far as I can tell, they don't pay anybody anything, but those are the best templates I've found. So that's what I use to help in my business. Um, but yeah, I would just say don't spaz so much about the ATS. Like you want to hit some of those keywords, you want to appeal, you want to show that you're relevant to the job, but yeah, don't spend so much time thinking about it. You need to appeal to humans.
Yeah, that's my take too. I think if you write a resume that is good for good for a human to read, contains like the most important keywords, like if they're looking for a SQL analyst, a Tableau
Yeah,
person, like you probably want those on there because they might be filters. Avoid, like you said, don't make it a big image that they can't read.
yeah.
Make it use Word, PDF it, whatever. And that's it's pretty simple in my opinion. I agree. I think it's a little bit overblown and people over optimize there.
Yeah.
Um,
You can use
yeah,
Gen AI is great for that. If you take a written resume that hopefully you wrote or a human wrote and take it to Gen AI and then say, hey, I'm looking to work these 5 keywords that I've pulled out of the job listing into my resume. Where can I put these in organically? It's fantastic for that.
yep.
AI is great to assist in the work that you've done and make your resume better. AI is really bad at writing your resume for you. Really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I love that distinction that, in general, you're not pro or anti AI, but like it has good use cases, it has pretty poor use cases. And
Yeah.
yeah, it seems like one of those, if you were to put in job description, hey, I want this job, here's the description, and here's the resume I have, any feedback on that, like that seems like something that it could potentially be
Yeah.
good at. Any other good use cases around resumes or particularly bad use cases other than like you said, just hey, write me a resume is probably low on your list, I think.
With AI,
Yeah.
Um, you can a lot of it that I use it for is just getting ideas.
Yeah.
So if you feed in like a job description and you say, what are the things, what are some examples of things I could say in my resume to appeal to this job, or you feed in a job description, you say, pull out the 10 most relevant terms or qualifications that you find from this listing. You can feed in a lot of things. One thing that not a lot of people are doing is take the company's website and grab their mission statement and then glean the important parts out of that, feed that into Gen AI, and then say, hey, how can I organically work some of these mission statement words and phrases into my resume? Or how would you take this and describe their corporate climate? Things like that. You can take the job listing and say, if you were in an interview, what questions would you ask of the interviewers? That's a huge one. And far too many people, it's getting into interview skills, but far too many people go into an interview and don't have any questions ready to go to ask the interviewers. That shows that
Yep.
they're interested and that they're seeing themselves in the job. It's great for coming up with ideas. So, your brain is working, you're writing stuff, you're creating stuff. You say, hey, give me a couple of ideas. It gives you a few ideas. Maybe you use those verbatim, or maybe it kind of jogs your memory and you're like, ooh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
And I can do this other thing. That's where it really excels, especially if you use it consistently, because you're going to start to know, okay, well, it's going to make certain suggestions that are crap and certain
Yeah.
suggestions that are great. And and it starts to, and this might get a little creepy, but it starts to get to know you and sort of your thought process. And if you give it feedback, you're like, hey, of those 5 suggestions, 1, 3, and 5 were wonderful. Don't ever tell me these other 2 again. That's terrible.
Yeah.
It'll it'll start gearing things toward the way that you think. uh, so yeah, use it for all of that.
Yeah, that's really really solid. That's been my general experience too. Like as a marketing tool, I would never want to like write a blog post that came out of
Yeah,
ChatGPT. Terrible idea. Like
yeah,
I would say no one should ever do that, or even like a LinkedIn post or a Twitter post. But like, hey, I want to write content for an aspiring analyst. Can you help me think of 40 topics I could write about? It's
yep,
actually pretty good at that. It does it real fast. And then you can go through and say, like, yeah, I like these, I don't like these. You can use your own judgment. So like a brainstorm partner, I think it's great. But don't let it have full control over the final
no.
output. That's probably the worst thing you can do.
And you want to
Um,
proofread the crap out of it. Like, make sure it's not,
yeah.
because it'll make stuff up. Like I said, it's great at fiction. It
Yep.
will make things up that are not your words, and that the things that aren't true. And so you got to be able to stand behind all of that, whether you're putting it out on social media or whether you're in an interview and they're like, "Hey, what did you mean when you said this?" You're like, "Uh, man, I didn't read that." So
Yep. Yep, exactly. Last one I want to ask you before we get into the audience Q&A portion is maybe a controversial one sometimes, but cover letters. Should somebody invest the time to write cover letters? Should they always do it sometimes? Like, what's any hot takes on cover letters?
I would never say never. What I will say is I have never seen a situation where a cover letter was going to make the difference, nor have I met a hiring manager that said, yes, cover letters are important. To me, anything that you have in your history, if you've got gaps, if you've got, if you took time off to have a baby and came back 2 years later, God bless you. I would just say you don't need a letter to explain that. You can
Yep.
explain that within the writing of the resume, within the summary, if it's necessary, or it's okay to just leave a little mystery for the interview. Just
Yep.
write the resume to the point where it's going to get you in the door, and then in the interview, you're like, yeah, my husband and I, or my wife and I, made a conscious choice that I was going to stay home for a year and raise the kids, and while I was doing that, I accomplished this, this, and this, and turn your perceived weakness into a strength. But it's okay to have a little mystery available. Give them something to ask you about in the interview, and then you can talk about that and show your verbal presentation skills.
Yep.
So I I,
Yeah.
I personally I don't write cover letters with people. I just find it's like, why am I going to spend time on something that I don't really believe in?
Hmm.
I'm still waiting for the day that a hiring manager comes to me, or I talk to somebody and they say, yes, a cover letter won me the day, and let me tell you about it. I can be trained. I will be perfectly willing to change my tune entirely on cover letters. That day hasn't come yet.
Yeah. I generally feel the same way. Like, when you think about that, like 3 to 5 second rule,
Yeah.
you're advising people to do like a couple sentences as a summary, and that might be like in place of the cover letter that has a better chance of getting read than an entire page of prose, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's great advice. So awesome. This has been really good so far, Albert. I want to jump into the Q&A portion. So guys, thanks for putting questions in here. Keep them coming. We will jump into those. But first, Albert, if people want to go deeper with you in resumes, where is the best place to do that?
The site I've got up is themajordata.com.
Yep. We've got a
So
right
majordata.com is
here.
something different. I tried for that and it was already taken. Yeah, so themajordata.com, it makes sense. I'm from Ohio, so the Ohio State University is my favorite. But yeah, that's where you can go, and you can get there is a free resume writing guide. I've got a top 10 tips. We are my son and my wife and I are developing some more free stuff that we're looking, top 10. I think everybody's kind of got that at this point. But on there, you can get a kind of a written review, which is the low touch item where send me your resume. I'll go through it. I'll give you 5 to 7 top tips. We can do a one-on-one coaching, or you can go for the whole 9 yards, in which we'll meet and I'll rewrite your whole resume. So I've had great success lately. I've been really terrible about reposting the people that have written to me and said, I just got a job based on the resume you wrote me. But yeah, here soon I'll be getting back on the content game and putting those out.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll,
Awesome.
I'll I'll take a Pepsi challenge with my resumes against anybody. I definitely know that the industry standard for price on rewriting resumes is about double what I'm charging. So yeah, get on there, give it a look.
Awesome. Yeah. So definitely check that out, guys. I put a link to that in the chat as well. You won't go wrong. Let's get into some of these questions. So let's see what we've got here. There's a good question here. This one's from Olivia. What's your take on freelancing as an entry-level data analyst? Currently looking at that option because she's been having difficulty finding a job. Is this a good route to get started?
Absolutely. I did a YouTube video a while back on ways to get experience if you're not able to, or you're not willing to go through the interview, entry level job if it's not working out for you. And there's a ton of people out there in that situation. Freelancing's wonderful. You can do it. You can kind of hire yourself out as a consultant or as a contract data analyst if you want to go out there and just kind of beat the bushes for clients. You can use Upwork. You can use Fiverr. I've toyed with the idea of doing like a 30-day challenge with Upwork, where like all I'm doing is getting out there and trying to see how many jobs I can get and how much work I can get done on that. It sounds like it would be kind of a grind, so I'd have to really figure out how I could carve out the time. But yeah, that's something that I want to do. But yeah, I recommend that to anybody. It's like anything else with like a rating system. You probably have to kind of, like hire yourself out at peasant wages right off
Yeah.
the start before you get reviews. There are people out there that are advisors on like how to succeed on those contract sites. I absolutely advise you to get out there, do some research, at least like free research on YouTube, and figure out how to sort of game the game, how to win contracts. And but yeah, that's an awesome way to do it. The thing that I would recommend is make sure you document,
Mm.
because you want to be able to put that on your resume in the most impressive fashion possible. So when you're talking about, make sure you're not overstepping your bounds as far as what you can say with clients and revealing their secrets and whatnot. But yeah, get on there and document the crap out of it, and just say, hey, I was an Upwork contract data analyst for 6 months, and I won this many contracts, and I did this kind of work. And yeah, that would be tremendously impressive to me if I was hiring somebody and they said, hey, couldn't
Yeah.
couldn't get full-time work through the normal means, so I was out there grinding and hustling. Very impressive.
I couldn't agree more. Like, why not, right?
Yep.
You're going to make money. You're going to learn some stuff. You're going to build your network. Thousand times yes. I totally agree with it. Here's another one, Albert. This is from Vasilis. What is the best resume type for an entry-level position? Should it be chronological, skill-based, or some other type?
Skill-based to me is a bit like cover letters. Unless you're gunning for the C-suite, I've just never seen a situation where a skills-based resume is going to be best for you. They tend to be very confusing, especially entry level. You're playing a volume game, and you're playing the percentages. You're going to be up against 1,000 resumes that are all chronological, and in that case, if yours come in as skills-based, it's not likely to be the, ooh, this is interesting. It's more likely to be the, well, this is annoying to read, trash. So in that case, you kind of want to be, that's something to me where you kind of want to be, in line with everyone else. I mean, it's like writing your, there's a dozen different things you can do to set yourself apart in a bad way. Like you could write your resume in Comic Sans, and it's not gonna,
Yeah.
it's gonna give a hiring manager a chuckle, but it's also gonna go in the trash. So
Yep.
yeah, I would say I've seen people attempt skills-based resumes, and I read them, and it's just like, this doesn't make sense. So yeah, and for entry level, like you don't have anything really to, like, what would you put in a skills-based resume? If you don't have enough volume to make an impressive chronological resume, skills-based is just listing your experience under various skills. If you don't have much experience, then it's going to be just as lean in any format. So I would say entry level, I would never do a skills-based resume. I'm not in the executive resume writing business just yet.
Yep.
That may be on the horizon. I have heard that in some cases that's a good thing if you're going for like director level, exec level. I'll defer to maybe Matt Bratton can tell us more about that. He's a C-suite executive.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a great answer. Um, Another one here that's very related. So Sarah says you recommended not putting skills at the top.
Hmm.
How about if you're returning to the workforce after a gap? Some people think that's a red flag. What can you do to address that and improve your chances if you've had, a couple years off of work or something like that?
Mm-hmm. My question, if I had this person in a one-on-one, my question would be, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
Even and not to put any pressure on you to upskill frantically while you're taking care of your kid, but even the hiatus for child raising, you take young mother, young father takes a year, 2 years off. If you can do that, bless you. That's an amazing gift to give to your child. But whatever time you take off, the kid doesn't take up 24 hours a day, at least not after the first couple of months. Um, so obviously, special needs kids would be different, but the kid isn't taking up. You're going to have time to read. They take naps, they sleep.
Yep.
They play on the floor with their toys by themselves at times. You're not running the camcorder 24/7. So my question would be, no matter what your hiatus was, what were you doing? And if you're assuming that you're just a productive person and you can't just take 6 months or a year off from the job and not do anything professional or intellectual, well, were you reading books? Were you taking classes? Were you upskilling? Did you work on a degree? I like to put things like that into experience, and I've got a lot of creative ways to do that. And that is actually one of my favorite challenges with a client is if they have a gap. It's one of the first things I look for. And that's one of the most fun things to kind of strategize is how do you list stay-at-home mother in the experience in a way that is constructive and kind of thought-provoking and is going to make someone want to interview you. Again, people perceive it as a weakness. I say, and it may well be, as far as comparing you to someone else that's been grinding away for that whole time. Turn that weakness into a strength. Lead with that. Get it out there. Say, within my experience, for 2 years, I was a stay-at-home mother, and here are my list of accomplishments during that time. Now, I wouldn't list like, feeding the kid or stuff like that,
Yeah.
but, professional related accomplishments. I read these 10 books. I read books on Alteryx and Python, and I did these projects and like list all that stuff on there. There's many different ways to be creative with that. Turn the weakness into a strength. Make that something that you lead with that when you come into the interview. You're not hiding from it. Come
Yeah.
on in and say, hey, let's address the elephant in the room, fellas. I'm here after 2 years out of the workforce. Let's talk about that right off the bat. And so, yeah, don't be belligerent about it, but don't hide from it either, because people are going to spot it. It's
Yep.
one of the first things they look for.
I completely agree. I think that's such good advice because on the hiring manager side, I absolutely would notice it every single time if somebody had it. And as a hiring manager, the concern is this person like, are they out because they wanted a job and like everyone else has turned them down? Are they lazy? And so there are legitimate concerns where I wouldn't want to hire somebody after a gap. But then, like you said, new kid, family member became ill and I wanted to take care of them, spending time with a parent at end of life or something like that. Like these are really admirable things.
Yeah.
Actually very positive to someone's character. And like the way, so I think it's just really important. Like you're saying, you have to know the story and know that it's going to come up and figure out how you're going to talk about that story. And I love that you're saying, do it proactively in like a thoughtful way. I really like that versus trying to hide from it. Cause like hiding from it is never going to work. They're going to assume the worst, most likely.
Yeah.
So,
Anamika says she's raising twin toddlers. You have my sympathies. I never, I definitely had two toddlers at the same time, borderline 3, but yeah, twins, that is a whole different ballgame. So
yeah,
well
good luck. You'll enjoy sleep in a few years, I'm sure. Awesome. Let me see some other questions here. Let's see. In general, this is from Jaya Varman.
Okay.
Can you give an ideal order for a resume? Like, is there always one order? Does it depend on somebody's skills, experience?
It depends on what your lead selling point is. I probably shouldn't have said I'd never lead with skills. I'm sure there's a situation in which I would. I can't think of a time when I ever have. I always recommend leading with a summary. It's just unless you have so much information to convey that you just can't fit it in, and that information is so overwhelming that you don't need it. If your past employers are Google, Microsoft, and Apple, hey, maybe you don't need a summary.
Yeah.
But I would always lead with a summary. I just say control the narrative. It's so important just to lead with what are my strengths in human form. At that point, you're appealing to the human reader. Here's my story in a single paragraph. hit with impact. And then I would say, ideally, you want your experience next. Now, if your experience is not a selling point, I've definitely written resumes for people where second section was projects. I've had a few where the next was education. It's tough because that's just in the North American, Canadian, US job market. Education is very rarely your selling point. Even if
Yeah.
you just graduated, it's just not. It's not weighted that heavily. Now, if you went, I don't think I've ever had a client that went to Harvard and Stanford, but maybe if that was the case. But if that's the case, you're probably relying on your network rather than a resume anyway. So the resume is an
Yeah.
afterthought. There's a reason why the Facebook started at Harvard, because the Harvard network is that strong. So yeah, I would just say ideally you want it to be summary, experience, and then after experience, probably some order of skills, education, projects, depending on which is the heaviest hitter.
Awesome. You talked about projects, Albert. This is another question from Shakar. Can you recommend some sites where I can find some good project for a portfolio to put on a resume?
Sites. Let me turn that around real quick, because I think the approach to projects is generally not the best. Again, not here to crap on anybody's approach. Whatever gets you out of bed and working on data in the morning is a good thing. If you are going to websites to find paint by numbers projects, if you're going to YouTube, if you're going over to Alex Freeberg and joining his million followers over there that are doing his projects, if you're doing Maven projects, awesome. Whatever gets you working on data is a good thing. What I will say is, if you're looking for paint by numbers projects, that is not the optimal approach. What I would do is go find a data set. Again, this goes back to pick a domain. What gets you out of bed with a song in your heart in the morning? Is it marketing? Is it social media analytics? Is it human analytics? Is it sports data? Whatever. Go find data, like just a pile of numbers and strings and whatever else. Go find a database that you can work with and go do something interesting with it. Answer a question that intrigues you, that's always bugged you. I love football. I love the NFL draft. I love, projects where it's like, hey, what's the trend of, drafting running backs over time, and do they pan out in the NFL? And, are draft picks from Ohio State more likely to succeed and get paid in the league than draft picks from Alabama? They are, but, I digress. But anyway, just do something that matters to you. If it's professional, it's better. So sports analytics is great, but there's just not a whole lot of jobs there. But yeah, find something that interests you and answer a question that has business relevance. Even better, go do coffee chats with professionals and say, hey, what's your pain points? What's the project that you can't get to because you just have too much on your plate? Is there anything I can help you with? And that'll, just like going to ChatGPT, that'll spur you to kind of great accomplishments. UC Irvine's machine learning dataset repository is a great site to go to. Just go there, find something that kind of tickles your fancy, and then say, well, what can I do with this? Can I use this to predict something? Can I make graphs with this that are meaningful? Can I make a dashboard? Anything where you're showing your creativity and your kind of professionally relevant curiosity, that's a good thing. It's better than, but a lot of times you got to start with the kind of canned projects. So if you go to Kaggle, or if you go to a site that provides projects, that's a great start.
Get the mechanics down, and then but I agree. And Albert, we're at time, but that is, I think, such good advice to end on. Is like, yes, it's cool to do a Maven project, do Alex's project, whatever, but you're gonna really learn when you're pursuing something on your own and actually having to go through it. So I love the passion projects. That's also going to be your best ammo in an interview. So just 100%, 10 out of 10 advice there. Amazing job on the show today, Albert. Thank you for joining us. folks in the audience. We had a ton of people here today. I'm not sure the total count, but it was up there. It's probably one of our most attended shows. So thank you guys for being so active.
You like me.
Oh yeah, definitely. And check out themajordata.com to get more from Albert. Also check out mavensofdata.com if you want to see additional shows. And again, Albert, thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for showing up. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.